a warm welcome to another edition of To The Point. When India's demographic dividend has become the talking point of the world, what is the Indian government doing to harness its labour force? Can archaic laws be replaced by the new age labour reforms? Joining me now is Union Minister for Labour and Employment, Mr. Bandaru Dattatreya. Welcome, sir, on To The Point.
Well, thank you.
So let me begin by asking you, why is there an impression that the present government is quite anti-labour and pro-industry? How would you really dispel that thought?
It is totally not correct.
Okay.
Because the labour laws which have been framed 40 years back, 50 years back, now in the present context, to generation of employment, that is employment generation and ease of doing business, and to attract the more investors, these laws should be the existing laws. There should be some simplification, some rationalization,
right,
and some of the laws should be amalgamated.
Your government did take initiatives like releasing a labour identification number, universal identification number, ease of doing business. You know, those kind of initiatives have been taken by your government, or what you're talking about. But somewhere there is still a perception that your government is anti-labour. So what does that mean? Have you been not able to convince the trade unions? Have you not been able to convince the industry? Somewhere, you know, there seems to be some kind of a gap. Why is this gap?
There is already, these are all things have been initiated in the UPA regime itself.
Okay.
And these things are started and processed 10 years back.
Okay.
Number one. But they were unable to do it because of their political pressures, because of they could not convince properly the trade unions, number one.
Okay.
And there was no conciliatory method also. There was no tripartite meeting also properly.
Okay.
But my government, and as I Labour and Employment Minister, have taken 21 tripartite meetings.
And what have they resulted in?
And in which we are getting to maximum consensus. For example, why I am stressing is, it is the need of the hour. It is for Prime Minister's the flagship programs, that is Make in India, Skill India, and Digital India.
All that depends on the labour reforms.
See, these are the very, very important is the technical force should be increased. Our India, the technical force is 1.7%. So for that, you have to increase more number of workers as technical skilled workers.
Right.
So for that, the new industry whichever it comes, it needs to be, you see, some reform of laws.
But in this
so
entire...
that's why these are the jointly programs. But now, for example...
Mr. Dattatreya, I'll just come to those reforms and the bills which you're talking about. Some 44 existing laws are there, which you are subsuming them into about 4 to 5 categories. Now, what happens from here on? Now, for example, some have applauded the clauses, some have criticized them. For example, that move of firing 300 employees at one go without a government sanction, then you're unable to form the trade unions. So those kind of moves have been resisted. Was this a kind of a unilateral decision? Because did the government not preempt that there could be problem from the trade unions' end?
No, because now the clarity has come to the trade unions also.
Okay.
Number one, the Second National Labour Commission, which has given a report 2002 for the reforms of labour laws.
Right.
So these commission reports are very, very excellent.
Okay.
And when the outstanding personality and the trade union background, Mr. Ravindra Verma, who was the chairman of that commission, and his suggestions, we are taking into consideration. We are making these 44 central labour laws which are existing. We are framing it to 4 labour codes.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that...
Can you elaborate these labour codes? How are you really going to codify them, and have you categorized them into some broad compartments?
So these 4 labour codes are, one is Code on Wages.
Okay.
Number 2 is code on industrial relation.
Okay.
Third, code on social security.
Okay.
And 4th is working conditions, safety and working conditions.
Okay.
So these 4 labor codes, it does not mean that we are taking away rights of the workers from these existing laws.
Right.
But wherever these laws are there, these 44 laws are there, it is somewhere will get benefit. Suppose the minimum wage, now we are making into the code on wages. When it comes to the code on wages, so 3 acts. The one is the Minimum Wage Act of 1948,
Right.
number 1, and the Payment of Wages Act 1936, and the Payment of Bonus Act 1965.
Right.
And another one is the Equal Remuneration Act of 1976.
Right.
These 4 laws will be amalgamated.
But are trade unions on board as far as these aspects as these provisions of the bill are concerned?
The provisions are...
I believe you did meet the trade union leaders on 19th November as well. What was the outcome of that meeting?
I had 3 tripartite meetings.
Okay.
In the 2 meetings, and many suggestions have come.
Okay.
In the 3rd meeting, a consensus has come.
Okay.
For example, there are 2...
But sir, if a consensus has come, then why are the BMS leaders, BMS is a BJP-backed organization, their own leaders are coming out and telling the media that they are going on a nationwide stir in the first week of December. So, which means that there is some kind of a contention which has not been addressed somehow.
No, because addressed. That's why BMS is positively looking. BMS...
But the BMS leaders say the opposite.
Other trade unions, all are in one voice. Because I am telling you, when it comes to this IR Act, the suggestion was in IR Act, when we are going to make it a code, that is called this organized sector.
Okay.
In organized sector, we are not allowing as office bearers into the organized sector from outside.
Okay.
From
But
outside,
sir, do you feel that
we are not allowing any office bearers in the organized sector.
Right. But you know, wherever you read, as far as the trade unions are concerned, there is an impression, because all the newspapers, the TV channels, they always say that government somehow has not been able to convince the trade unions. So why is there a communication gap? Of course, you are holding meetings, but when they go out of those meetings, they say things which are just the opposite. Is the government not really been able to convince them of the points?
The thing is surprise. See, for example, take INTUC. INTUC affiliated to Congress, and AITC is affiliated to, that is CPI.
But what happens to BMC? That's a BJP-backed organization.
BMS, they are independent.
Yeah, BMS.
They are independent. Neither they are affiliated to any political party.
Okay.
That's why they are expressing their
But is it not an RSS affiliate?
Independent. It is not at all RSS affiliated. It is the autonomous body working for labor interest.
So why are the headlines saying that right, left and the center are all one as far as the trade unions are concerned, as far as the opposition to these the provisions of this legislation?
That is not correct. That's why in the recent strike,
Okay.
BMS is deferred.
Okay.
BMS is deferred because we have taken many initiatives on the recommendations of the trade unions. Out of the 15 demands,
Most of them you feel that you have addressed.
9, 10 we are agreeing.
Okay. So now that the winter
So
session
that's
is
why,
around the corner, right?
in spite of that, my agreement, in spite of that, my consensus, they are telling, okay, very good. But outside goes, then it is something is political.
So do you feel that these protests are politically motivated?
I can't say totally politically motivated, but it is their perception should be changed.
Okay.
Their perception should be changed.
Perception has to be changed. But
Perception
now
has to be changed, number one. And you have to see in the present context. See, unless the conducive atmosphere created in the industry, then only the worker will benefited.
But during the monsoon session, we saw that your ministry had pressed the pause button as far as these labour reforms were concerned. Obviously, you were looking out for consensus. Even Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been often talking about this consensus that you have to elucidate from these trade unions. Now that the winter session is round the corner, how hopeful are you of pushing the labour reforms?
No, we have already.
Because a lot is at stake now during this
Now
session.
this session, I am hopeful of two bills.
Okay.
One is Child Labour Prohibition and Regulation Amendment Act.
Okay.
of
In fact,
2000.
I'll talk to you about the child labour bill a little later.
That is-
But let's take a different point now, sir. When you talk about these labour reforms, a very important aspect which the employees look forward to is the casualization of workforce. Are the labour reforms, if at all they are pushed, can they really prevent the casualization of workers? For example, you have various classes of workers. You have temporary workers, permanent workers, daily wages, contract. So are the labour reforms really going to address these concerns? Or don't you feel that there should be just two categories, permanent and temporary? Are you also working on those lines?
No, because there are different issues. See, basically, the one is contract labour.
Okay.
That is number one. Second one
Whose
is
conditions are pathetic?
outsourcing labour. These things are there. These things are to be we cannot see in isolation.
Okay.
And one thing I am telling you, the labour is under the concurrent list. And appropriate governments are state governments.
Okay.
So they have right to liberty under the federal structure. They can make any law, they can amend any law. So that's why this is basically first is the concurrent list.
But sir,
Number
already
two,
there were a lot of
because
existing...
I am telling you the
Yes.
minimum wage. For example, minimum wage. Minimum wage act, I am going to prepare to do it. Now we are giving minimum wage, the national floor level minimum wage. That is 160.
Okay.
160. But it is not a statutory.
Okay.
It is a
It
recommendation.
changes from state to state. But sir, what I want to
But
ask you
as
is...
it comes to the states, you see somewhere in the Bihar, the minimum wage will be low.
Yeah.
And Chandigarh, if it comes to Chandigarh, it is high.
And it differs gender-wise as well.
Because of this environment, place,
Right.
and their
So
conditions.
basically you say that
Their conditions.
that the ball is in the state's court equally. If centre is responsible, then state is also responsible. But sir, tell me, there were a lot of norms which were pre-existing before we started talking about these labour reforms. Like for example, every office should have a creche. Then the contract employees, they should have a regular insurance. I would not like to single out any ministry, but at the central level, if you look at the various ministries, there are so many contract workers who are there, but these concerns are not addressed.
So that's why we are coming out with the new labour laws in which any contractor employs any worker, that employer should be made registration.
Okay.
Number one, it is a compulsory. And he will be the responsible.
But sir, if the employer...
For EPF.
But if the employer is a government organization, because I know of ministries I know of ministries who have hired contract people, contract staff for 10 years after, they've put 10 to 12 years and then also they have not become permanent. So those are the kind of conditions which are prevailing.
No, what I am telling is either central government, we have appropriate authority. The state government, the appropriate authority.
Okay.
Number two. That's why in these going to be reforms, it will be a statutory body, a commonalty will be there. A commonalty will be there under which for example, wage is there. Suppose any lockout is there, any retrenchment is there, any strike is there,
Okay.
then the wage which we are going to give, now if he gets 15 days for wage, we are going to increase it to 45 days.
But sir, the biggest question at the moment is that, when you talk about these newer laws, the 44 laws which are being subsumed into 4 or 5 categories, the trade unions do say that, the right to association, right to collective bargaining, right to collective service conditions, these are the basic essence of labour laws. But if these reforms are pushed, then somewhere down the line this would be diluted. Do you feel so?
No, that is not correct. Because, not at all, totally correct. Because it is totally, I am telling you, I am convincing you that whatever we are going to do, it is in the interest of workers, number one, basically.
And the industry?
Number 2 is employment generation.
Okay. So your basic focus is going to be employment generation.
This is the main is
giving a right balance to the labor, to the labor as well as the industry.
Yeah.
Okay. So on that note, I'll take a break. We're running short of time. We'll have to take a break, Mr. Dattatreya. We'll come back. We talk about the Child Labor Amendment Law. Back in a moment. Welcome back. You're watching To The Point with Union Labour Minister Bandaru Dattatreya. Talking about the Child Labour Amendment Bill. Now that the new bill seems to allow the children below 14 years to work and, in specified conditions, there are accusations that the government is trying to dilute this law a little. Would you agree to this?
No, this is the child labor, that is child labor regulation and provision.
Okay.
This act, it was framed in 1986. Now we are making an amendment in 2012. In this amendment, basically the primary objective, the primary objective is the children working below the 14 years are totally prohibited. Totally prohibited, number 1. But however, there is an exception. Child who helps for the family, helps, that not working, helps for the family after school hours.
Okay.
Number 1. And in vacations.
But Mr. Dattatreya, but isn't this a very vague description of the provision you're talking about? I'll just give you a small example. Allow me to do that. You're talking about the fact that the children below the age of 14 are going to work. I was reading a provision of the legislation which says that the children will be allowed in select non-hazardous industries. They would be allowed to work. But there are apprehensions that this child labor would almost become a norm, for example, in sectors like agriculture, or later on in the labor-intensive sectors like for carpet weaving, then you have footwear, garments industries. Don't you think that in the long run this might become a norm?
No, not at all. Because here is, in this act, in this amendment, we are adding a new definition.
What does that say?
That is new definition that is called adolescent.
Okay.
Adolescent. Adolescence means that is 16 years to 18 years. So किशोर कहा जाता है.
Okay.
So that category will be totally prohibited in hazardous areas.
Okay.
In hazardous areas, strictly prohibited. And the age between because here we are connecting the total child labor abolition up to 14 years with Right to Children Education Act, that is from 6 to 14 years.
Is there a mechanism to monitor the breaches as well? Now, for example, if a child starts working, you're saying he'll work during the vacations and he's going to help the family members. So that child is going to become the source of the entire economic setup of the family. How would you track that, he's not missing on schools? And is there a monitoring mechanism you have?
No, naturally, because when we are making an amendment, when we are making an act, naturally, mechanism will be there, rules will be framed, norms will be framed. So, in which we are mentioning family means, family definition is there.
Okay.
Family means father, mother, brother, sister.
Now, for example, Mr. Dattatreya, yeah.
And suppose, and mother, sister or brother, father, sister or brother, only these people are included in the family definition. And that too, we have clearly mentioned, it is not for the employee and employer relation.
Okay.
And India is a unique country, number 1.
But what happens, what happens to the child labor in the farm sector? Now, for example, 70% of the children are employed in the farm sector. Will there not be an increased incidence of child labor in the farm sector, which could ultimately lead to trafficking?
Any sector which is below 14 years
right.
is totally prohibited, and stricter punishment is there.
Okay.
Stricter punishment is there.
What's the punishment like, if I could just ask you one?
The stricter punishment is, number 1, earlier it was contravention with the act. Contravention with the act, imprisonment was only for 3 months to 1 year.
Okay.
Now we have make it
Okay.
6 months to 2 years imprisonment or 20,000 to 50,000 fine, both also. So that's why stricter punishment.
But these kind of provisions, do you think that will they be able to prevent a pattern of trafficking? Because there is an NCPCR report which actually says that children from Rajasthan and Andhra Pradesh, they were trafficked to Gujarat for working on BT farms. Now, for example, I was talking to you about the child labor in the farming sector. So, do you think that these kind of preventive measures or the punitive measures which you have talked about, will they prevent that?
In this act, we are making one more provision.
Right.
That this implementing agency, implementing authority will be the district collector,
Okay.
the district magistrate,
Okay.
or he can also add his own subordinate
Okay.
exclusively for monitoring this child labor and trafficking and all these things.
Right.
Number one. Number two is, and we are making a rehabilitation fund, child labor, child and adolescent labor rehabilitation fund, in which
The central government pools in. For that
in
fund.
this act itself,
Okay.
then the fund, whichever the fine collect, it will go to on its account.
Okay.
Number one.
Okay.
Number two, even the state government,
Okay.
even the state government will be responsible.
Okay.
In a state, suppose 100 people or 200 people has been liberated,
Right.
the state government also should be contributed 15,000 rupees per child.
But sir, I mean, there are so many children
So
who are
that-
also, sir, I'll come to you. But sir, there are so many children who are working in the audio-visual entertainment industry, where we find about 4 or 5 years children, 5-year-old children who are employed with some entertainment industry or the other. And television and the entertainment industry is generally not considered to be a family enterprise. And they're also, the children, in case of a failure, they go through a psychological crisis. Do you have a safety net for children like these who are employed in the audiovisual medium?
Here is, so very clearly we have mentioned, child performs or processes.
Okay.
Performs, you please hear me, performs or processes.
Okay.
Process any work on as a hobby,
Okay.
number one. Or a person directly involving himself. It is,
But sir, these
it is-
children I'm talking about, they actually compete. It's a highly competitive environment in which they perform.
No, that's why that is will be the respective state governments are there. The monitoring will be there.
So do they have a safety net for children
Yeah,
like this? Who are,
that is there. That
okay.
is there. That is there. Safety is there, because we
But the
are,
onus again is on the states.
we are very the states. Number two,
Okay.
the very important thing is the working conditions of the child. First of all, we are not at all allowing any child below the 14 years,
Okay.
because it will be in conformity with the right to children, right to education. That is number one.
Right.
Because that age is 6 to 14.
I was reading a comment on the Facebook which said that, industries like rice mills, the beedi industries and the coir making, now the incidence of child labor would probably increase. Would you really agree? Because that particular comment said that we are actually, if this child labor amendment law comes into play, then we might go into a pre-industrialization era.
No, either is, you see, if after this amendment a new bill comes, then I feel so, the CLP's number will be reduced.
Okay.
Because when the stricter implementation will be there, even if the liberated child
Why are the NGOs apprehensive about this?
and NGOs, see, the comparatively with the statistics which are available
Okay.
on with the NSSO, the earlier were 1 crore, something like 30 lakhs.
Okay.
Now at present, number is, it is something like 60 lakhs.
Okay.
So day by day, the awareness has come,
Okay.
and the parents also interested
Okay.
for the education of their children. So this has been increased.
Okay.
So while this awareness is very important, and role of the NGOs also important, third one is skilling is very important.
Okay. Your skilling mission brings me to a very important question before I just wind up the interview. Skill India is one of the very pet projects of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, the Make in India, and of course Skill India. But when the Skill Ministry came into force, people say in the powers of corridor that probably it has made the Labour Ministry redundant. Is that true? I might be wrong in what I'm saying, but I'm just wanting to clarify.
And absolutely not correct.
Okay.
Because, see, Prime Minister, he wants with a new vision.
People in Hindi say that skill ministry के आगे Labour Ministry को भाव नहीं दिया जाता. Is that true?
नहीं, वो करेक्ट नहीं है. वो समझने में आजकल जो है प्रचार जो है अलग तरीके से होता है.
Okay.
और हम जो चश्मे लगाकर जो कलर के चश्मे लगा के देखते हैं वही कलर हमको दिखता है. तो इसलिए वो चश्मे थोड़ा बदलना पड़ेगा.
But if the reforms agenda doesn't get pushed through, you would be blamed for it?
No, not
or
at all.
The blame has to be shared?
I think that the reforms agenda will be definitely in the history of India,
Okay.
in the annals of history of India.
Okay.
That will be the only agenda because it will be transparent, number one. Number two is accountability. These are the two major changes which are going to come on both the sides. I'm not telling on one side.
Okay. So on that positive note,
That's why the accountability and transparency. This is
that they will be the hallmarks of
That
the
is-
Labour
that-
Ministry.
that is-
Okay, so on that positive note, I'll have to end the program here. Wish you all the best, Mr. Dattatreya. So that's all the time we have for. See you next time on another episode. Goodbye and thanks for watching.